Hey, it's me Tom again, and today we're going to be talking about yet another filter. But this time it's something a little different. It's not a diffusion filter and it's not even from Tiffen. It's this filter right here, the Kase or Kase Blue Streak filter. Not exactly sure how you pronounce the brand, but who cares? It's a great filter and I have some footage prepared, so check that out, and after that I will give you my thoughts. Enjoy! Okay, so since this is the first time I'm actually reviewing a filter of this type, let me first explain to you what it does. I've talked plenty here about the cinematic look, and I know it's the most overused term in the world, but it's the best way to describe it. How to achieve the cinematic look is very subjective to me, and to a lot of other people it's actually trying to soften up your image, make it less perfect, less clean, less digital, and giving it just more character. And for that I usually like to use diffusion filters that soften up your image, lift your contrast, create glow around lights, and make the skin appear more organic. Or organic skin maybe doesn't sound so good, but the whole image gets a more film-like look, which is for me one key characteristic to making your image appear cinematic. And this filter right here, the Blue Streak filter, which I'm actually using right now as well, as you can see in the background, has just one purpose basically. It recreates an anamorphic look, or at least one key characteristic of an anamorphic lens. And that is stretching your light across the screen. This is what a lot of people, and not just filmmakers, associate with a cinematic image, a film-like Hollywood look. I'm not going to get deeply into how an anamorphic lens works, because that's a lot of explaining and I'm honestly not even sure I can explain it to you. There are already lots of videos out there on this topic, so check out those if you're interested. But I can definitely tell you that anamorphic lenses are being used quite a lot in movie productions and high-end commercials. And although there have been some quite affordable anamorphic lens options on the market lately, it's still quite an expensive thing to get into. So this filter right here gives you a great alternative, a very cheap alternative to recreate some aspects, not all of them, but some aspects of an anamorphic look. Let's first talk about what you get when you buy this filter. The case is actually quite nice. It's actually better than most of my Tiffen filters, to be honest, which are way more expensive. You get a nice plastic case, sturdy. Inside there's the foam that holds the filter in place. Looking at the filter itself, it actually is a lot lighter and thinner than I initially thought, but it doesn't feel cheap, and the rotating mechanism feels actually very good. It's not too loose or hard to turn, which is very important since you have to adjust this every time you put it on another lens to get the streaks aligned perfectly. There are some problems with that design, however, which I will get into later in this video. And just so you know, I can't really explain to you why the lines have to be set in a vertical way so they appear horizontally in your image, but that's how it works. Maybe someone in the comments can explain that one to me or to everyone. because I can't really wrap my head around that. And just keep it in mind, you have to set them vertically so they appear horizontally in your image. So how does this filter affect your image? First off, it doesn't really affect your sharpness, which is good in this case. It shouldn't do it because that's not the purpose of this filter. There is a blue tint, which is also to be expected since this filter is covered in blue lines. And the actual effect, as you can see, are these really cool looking streaks or flares that are reminiscent of an anamorphic look. They obviously vary in their intensity depending on what reflection you're filming or what light source is in the frame. And they are not always going to be completely blue because not every light is blue. But since this filter is covered in blue lines, mostly things will tend to look bluish. And it looks really cool. But to me, what makes it look even better is combining it with a diffusion filter, like the Black Pro Mist, for example, which I used in lots of examples right here. As you can see, this combination gives it a more soft, vintagey look, which is more reminiscent of an old anamorphic cinema lens. And now it just looks great in my opinion. And that's also the reason I used this filter on a music video shoot. And this was actually the first time I tried it out at all, which is not something I would usually recommend. Always test out your gear before you use it in a project. But in that case, the whole video was supposed to be more run and gun and just trying out things. It was supposed to have this dirty, more scratched up look. So it didn't really matter if something didn't really work out with this filter because the whole entire video was supposed to be chaotic and light flares everywhere and scratches. So it didn't really matter. But I'm very glad that I tried it out because it looked really cool in the video and every scene had way more dynamic with the lights streaking, flaring across the image, and yeah, it really fit the whole music video well, and I'm very glad that I tried it out in that case. It just got released. Maybe you're into German horrorcore, then you can check it out and you can see what the filter actually does because I used it for every single scene. I will link it somewhere on the screen or in the description. So let's talk about some things that you have to keep in mind with this filter. First off, I already said it, this filter doesn't replace an anamorphic lens obviously. It just gives you one key characteristic, and that's the blue streaks or flares. There's no stretching of the entire image, no squeezing, which an anamorphic lens actually does. There's no oval bokeh, there's none of that. But if you're not a professional filmmaker, cinematographer, nobody's gonna think about that because the blue streaks, in my opinion, really, in certain cases, add a lot of production value, a lot of dynamic to a scene that you otherwise just wouldn't have. But there are some things that you need to keep in mind. It depends on a lot of factors, but if you're using a very small sensor on your camera or have a very wide angle lens where everything is in focus, the lines itself on the filter can appear in your image. And by that, the flares can have like multiple flares in itself. You can see the lines in the bokeh or in the reflections. So just be aware of these things. This filter is obviously not a real anamorphic lens. In the end, it's just blue lines that are on a piece of glass. And those can appear in your image. Sometimes, if you're not fully zoomed in, if you're just on a very wide angle lens, the flares itself sometimes have these multiple lines, which are just the lines that are appearing on your filter. It sometimes still looks very cool, but that is obviously not the real characteristic of an anamorphic lens. So in the music video I showed you earlier, you can actually see it in some scenes where the flares are actually multiple flares within one flare. I don't know how to exactly describe it, but you can see the multiple lines that are not supposed to be there, but it still in a way looked quite cool. But if you're on a really wide lens, it can actually happen that you just have the lines in focus, which is obviously not something you want to happen. So be aware of that, test it out. In most cases, you should be fine. Now let's talk about something that does annoy me about this filter, and that is that it's sometimes a nightmare to get off your lens. Screwing it on is quite easy. The part itself that you can grip that doesn't actually rotate is very thin, but screwing it on is not the biggest problem. But if you screw it on too tightly, getting it off can be very frustrating. I always have my Tiffen filters getting stuck a bit, but usually if you apply a bit of force with both fingers, like your index finger and your thumb, it usually is quite easy to get off. But this filter is so thin, or the part that you can grip that doesn't rotate indefinitely is so thin that it's really hard to get off sometimes. So just keep that in mind. During the music video shoot, I actually was trying to get it off at some point, but I wasn't able to. So this could have been a really big problem if I were on a shoot where I really had to like change the lens or change the filter, and just keep that in mind. What helps always to get something off your lens if it's stuck is wrapping a piece of rubber around it and just applying that, and then trying to apply a bit of force, and then it usually gets off. So this is how I got it off, but it's still quite annoying, and definitely the hardest filter to get off that I ever used. And that also leads me to the second problem with this filter. Since this is a filter with a rotating mechanism that doesn't have any hard stops, like you can rotate this thing forever, it also means that it's quite hard to combine with filters that also rotate forever, basically. Since I have the RX10, which doesn't have a great internal ND filter. It does have one, but it's not strong enough for shooting outside in sunlight. So I have to use a variable ND filter. And this variable ND filter is also rotatable. So when I rotate this one and I grip it the wrong way, I also rotate my streak filter, which is obviously not something you want to happen, because then your streaks or your flares will be crooked, not really in a horizontal line, and then your entire image can get ruined. So this is also something you can adjust for. You have to keep it in mind with every scene, with every adjustment. If you adjust your ND filter, it can happen that you also move your flares. So be aware of that and try to adjust it accordingly, but it's quite annoying. I wish there would be a hard stop at some point where you can like get it in a fixed position, but there isn't, so you have to deal with that. So what's my overall verdict on this filter? Honestly, I really like it. I love it almost. It's just a great addition to my kit. I bought it for like 40 euro on AliExpress, which to me is a great price for what you get. There is another filter called the Nisi Allure Streak Filter, which I see a lot more of on YouTube. But that one is way more expensive, and to me, from what I can see, just does the exact same thing for a higher price tag. So I just stick with the one from Kase. And yeah, as I said, I'm so happy that I got it now. It's obviously not something you need for every shoot. Lots of movies out there aren't shot on anamorphic lenses, so it's not mandatory to use this one. But I just picture a scene with lots of street lights or a car commercial, music videos. This filter is just always something that will look great to me and make your image more dynamic, create more interest to a scene that might look otherwise a bit boring. This just adds so much more to it and makes it look, I'm gonna say it again for the last time, cinematic. So yeah, that's my verdict. And that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I enjoy making these videos. I really enjoy seeing the growth of this channel. Like, I get more and more comments, more likes, more subscribers. And yeah, this motivates me to do more of these videos. Maybe I will do a video that's not directly about filters, because at some point I'm gonna run out of filters. So if you have some ideas on topics that I can make videos about, just let me know. If you have questions about something, let me know. And yeah, if you haven't, please leave a like, follow me on Instagram, subscribe to this channel, and yeah, just keep watching my videos and keep at it, create some great stuff. I will try to do that as well. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.